My name is Latrice. And at 25, the envelope beside my plate felt less like mail and more like a warning dressed in white. My name sat printed in stiff black letters. Centered, emotionless, no handwriting, no heart, just the sterile neatness of something official. Dad didn't even meet my eyes when he said, $2,500 a month includes rent, utilities, and your share of household costs. His tone was flat, practiced, like he was reciting figures from a billing statement. I unfolded the paper. Every line was neatly itemized. Base rent $1,200. Utilities $400. Household contribution $900. At the bottom, due on the 1st, late fees apply. Across from me, Aspen twirled her pasta like this was any other dinner. Her nails glimmered under the chandelier. Her phone balanced beside her plate, playing some influencer's skincare reel. She didn't look up once, but Aspen doesn't. I started. Mom cut me off. Her voice syrup sweet and sharp underneath. Your sister's still finding her path. You, on the other hand, have 2 jobs. You're stable, Latrice. It's time you learned responsibility. Stable. That was their word for exhaustion. Stable because I hadn't had a weekend in 6 months. Because I worked the bank from 8 to 4 o'clock, sprinted across town to wait tables until midnight because I skipped breakfast and clipped coupons and still lived in the same pink-walled room I painted when I was 10. I looked at the invoice again. Each number stared back like a quiet accusation. When does this start? I asked. Next week, Dad replied, folding his napkin. We trust you can manage it. Mom's fork tapped against a glass, and late payments come with a $50 fee. That's how the real world works. I nodded because what else was there to do? I folded the paper with care, slipped it into my pocket, and excused myself before my chest cracked open from the pressure building inside it. If you've ever been betrayed by the people who were supposed to be your safety net, tell me where you're watching from. Upstairs, I opened my laptop. My checking balance glowed back at me. Not good, not terrible, just tired. I opened a new spreadsheet and typed rent receipts. Downstairs, Aspen laughed at something on her phone. I added a new column, expenses they don't pay. Turns out I was learning, just not the lesson they thought they were teaching. When I checked my credit card statement later that night, I saw her name, Aspen. By the end of that week, I'd clocked 5 full days at the bank, 3 closing shifts at the restaurant, and eaten maybe 4 proper meals. My wrists ached from trays, my legs hummed with fatigue, and my inbox was a graveyard of overdraft notices. When I walked in Friday night, Aspen was sprawled across the couch in one of my old sweatshirts like she'd claimed it. The TV flickered with a dating show laugh track. On the coffee table sat a package addressed to me, bought with my card. I lifted it. Aspen, did you use my card again? She didn't even blink. You said I could once. That was for textbooks months ago. She shrugged, eyes still glued to the screen. Well, you never changed your login. I waited for a flicker of guilt. Nothing. Mom appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a dish towel. What's going on? She's still using my credit card, I said. Mom sighed like she'd heard the same boring tune before. Latrice, your sister's still figuring herself out. You're the one with steady income. Maybe try supporting each other instead of keeping score. That was the moment it clicked. They didn't see theft. They saw redistribution. Balance. I earned, Aspen consumed. Natural order. That night, I sat on my bed scrolling through my bank app. Cosmetics, streaming subscriptions, meal kits, purchases I didn't make, all billed through the shared family Wi-Fi. I opened my spreadsheet again, added another tab, Aspen's charges. Then another browser tab, how to dispute unauthorized family card use. I didn't hit enter, not yet. Instead, I opened a fresh search bar. How to open a high-yield savings account. The next day, during my lunch break, I did it quietly, deliberately, not at my own branch, too visible, at a credit union across town. I used my work email, set up a new P.O. box, and transferred $1,000, my quarterly bonus, into it. A quiet beginning. That night, I color-coded my spreadsheet. Green for verified payments. Yellow for disputed charges. Red for Aspen's fingerprints. Each cell felt like breathing. 2 days later, I was balancing cash drawers at the bank when Ezra leaned over the divider, grinning like always. "You look like you're prepping for trial." "Maybe I am," I muttered. He raised an eyebrow. I told him bits and pieces. The rent, Aspen's charges, the unspoken family rules. "Want to see something?" he said. He typed into a public registry, spun his screen toward me. Mortgage refinanced. Delinquent 90+ days. I stared. That can't be right. I've been paying. Ezra's voice softened. "They're not teaching you responsibility, Latrice. They're keeping the lights on with your paycheck." That sentence lodged somewhere deep in my chest. That evening, I added a bold new row to my spreadsheet. Mortgage contribution. Beneath it, I wrote, "This isn't about helping me grow. It's about keeping them afloat." Then I made 2 copies of the file, one for my desktop, one in the cloud, and renamed the folder Evidence. When I closed the screen, the glow stayed in my mind like a secret I was finally ready to keep. I started counting, not hours, but exits. How much I'd need to leave, how long it might take to breathe somewhere that didn't cost my peace. It started small. Ezra slid his phone across the breakroom table one afternoon. "Look," he said, "foreclosed listing, 3-bedroom, decent neighborhood, crazy cheap because the owner's desperate." I expected peeling paint and rotted floors. Instead, clean windows, hardwood, a small yard, nothing fancy, but possible. "I can't afford a house," I said, though even I didn't sound convinced. Ezra grinned. "Not yet. But you're closer than you think. You've been saving, right?" I nodded. My secret account balance wasn't much, but it was growing. That night, I read everything I could find. Buying property through an LLC, keeping ownership private, protecting identity and public records. By morning, I had a plan. Mrs. Vega, one of my favorite clients at the bank, part-time realtor, full-time realist, met me at a corner cafe. When I told her what I wanted, she didn't even blink. "We'll form an LLC," she said. "You'll be the sole member, but your name won't touch the property deed. We'll call it Vanquish Properties." "Why Vanquish?" I asked. She smiled. "Because when I asked what this was about, that's the first word you wrote." I didn't remember writing it, but it felt right, solid, final. Within a week, the paperwork was done. Ezra helped with the numbers. Mrs. Vega handled the filings. I had a folder labeled Vanquish Properties LLC and a checklist titled Operation Exit. Every night I packed a few things, books, clothes, sketches, slipped them into my car, drove them to a storage unit during lunch breaks. No one noticed the empty shelves. Aspen was busy with her ring light. Mom and Dad just assumed I was tired. They weren't wrong. I was tired. But for once, that tiredness had direction. I picked a Tuesday. Aspen's Pilates day, Mom's book club, Dad's racquetball. Timing rehearsed to perfection. That morning, Ezra helped load the last boxes into his trunk under the pretense of giving me a ride. The rest, laptop, toiletries, final drawer of clothes, fit into my back seat. I left my key on the nightstand. On the kitchen table, a folded sheet of paper. Latrice inside. As of today, I am moving out. Rent is no longer due. All services in my name will be disconnected within 24 hours. Please forward mail to the address on file with the bank. No anger, no explanations, just truth. I stood in the doorway listening to the house breathe. The faint scent of lemon cleaner. The hum of the fridge. Aspen's lavender salt lamp glowing faintly through her cracked door. My old trophies still lined the mantel. Debate. Science fair. Perfect attendance. Proof of who I'd been, not who they saw. I shut the door quietly. In the car, I scrolled through my contacts. Mom block. Dad block. Aspen block. The silence that followed felt like someone had finally shut off the background noise of my life. Later that afternoon, Mrs. Vega called. "Your offer's accepted," she said. "Vanquish Properties officially owns the listing. Closing in under 30 days. I pressed my forehead to the steering wheel. Not relief. Not yet, but something steadier. Like the ground beneath me had finally stopped shifting. I parked outside my temporary sublet, Ezra's sister's guest room, and carried in the first box. That night, I slept without earplugs, no footsteps above me, no phone calls, no guilt, just quiet. And the next morning, when I checked my savings, I typed a final line beneath the total. Final rent paid. None. They found me faster than I expected. The letter must have arrived that morning. A plain envelope, black ink, addressed to current resident. Inside, a formal notice. The mortgage on their home had officially transferred to Vanquish Properties LLC, effective immediately. Mrs. Vega texted me a photo of my mother's face as she retrieved the mail, pale, open-mouthed, clutching the paper like it might bite her. My father stood behind her, scanning the page with tight, angry eyes. By evening, they were at my door. I watched them through the peephole. My father in a stiff polo shirt, jaw clenched. My mother wringing her hands, Aspen behind them, arms crossed, sunglasses perched on her head like armor. I opened the door halfway, stepping into the threshold. "Latrice," Mom began, voice light like nothing had happened. "We got a letter. Some company took over the mortgage. We think there's been a mistake." "There hasn't," I said. Dad's brow furrowed. "You know anything about Vanquish Properties?" "I do." Didn't say more. I didn't need to. Mom shifted, glancing nervously at Aspen. "Sweetheart, Aspen's going to need a place to stay while we figure this out. Just temporarily. You've always been so responsible." I nodded thoughtfully. "Garage couch $2,500 a month. Late fees apply." Aspen's head snapped toward me. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious," I said. "You taught me well." Dad's face went red. "This isn't a game, Latrice. We're your family." I tilted my head. "So, were you when you handed me a typed invoice and called it love?" Mom's voice cracked. "We didn't mean to." "I know exactly what you meant to do," I said. "And I learned." I stepped back inside and closed the door. Their voices muffled through the wood. No yelling, no pounding, just the hollow quiet of people who had finally run out of control. I stood still for a moment, then turned and walked to the small table where my laptop waited. The folder labeled mortgage documents was already open. I added a new file beneath it. Interaction log. First visit. I didn't invite them back. They showed up again anyway. This time they didn't knock right away. Just stood at the edge of the porch like they were waiting for permission. I opened the door slowly and didn't step aside. "We need to talk," Dad said. "I figured," I replied. I walked into the house without saying anything else. They followed. I led them to the kitchen where 3 chairs were already arranged, and a manila envelope sat on the table. I sat first, then slid the envelope toward them. Mom opened it. Inside were 2 years of records. Every rent payment, every late fee, utility splits, grocery receipts, credit card charges under Aspen's name. It took them minutes to realize what they were looking at. "I kept every single document," I said. "Because you taught me to." Aspen sat stiffly, arms crossed, pretending not to read over Mom's shoulder. Dad stayed silent until he spotted the last page. "The property deed." "What is this?" he asked, voice flat. "It's the deed to your house," I said. "Vanquish Properties owns it now." His eyes scanned the page, then scanned it again. "This is real." "Yes, but how?" "You gave me an education, and I put it to use." He gripped the table. His shoulders slumped forward slowly like a man unraveling. "We were trying to make you stronger. You made me silent, I said. You made me tired, but I learned to document. I learned to survive. And I learned to own. Mom reached across the table, her fingers trembling. Latrice, please stood. The mortgage is under a legal entity. You'll receive a new payment schedule next week. If you want to negotiate, use the email listed on the letter you received. Dad's eyes didn't leave the deed. His hands were still shaking. I walked them to the door, opened it, and waited until all three stepped outside. Aspen said nothing. Before I shut the door, I handed Mom the envelope. You'll need this, I said. It's everything you taught me. The room I chose faced east, so it caught the morning sun in full. I painted the walls soft white and rolled out the rug I'd stored for years. The brushes came out of their packaging with the quiet reverence of something sacred. A blank canvas waited on the easel. I hadn't painted in over 2 years. It wasn't just time or exhaustion. It was how small I'd felt in that house. How little space I was allowed to take up. Art had become indulgent, unnecessary, forgotten. Now it felt like oxygen. I was laying out my palettes when the doorbell rang. I almost didn't answer, but I did. Mom stood there alone, holding something wrapped in tissue paper. I won't stay long, she said, voice low. I just found this. She unwrapped the frame and handed it to me. It was a photo from my senior year art show. Me standing in front of my painting, holding a blue ribbon, smiling like I believed it would matter forever. You were so proud, she whispered. We were wrong. I didn't say anything. I just looked at the photo, remembering the version of me who had existed before bank shifts and invoices and learning how to survive in silence. I thought maybe you'd want it back, she added. I nodded, took it from her hands and placed it on the shelf in the art room without comment. She stood there a moment longer, then turned and walked back down the driveway. I didn't follow. Instead, I closed the door, walked to the easel, and picked up my brush. The canvas was still blank, but the light was good. I sent the rent notice on the 1st of the month. It was short, professional, and left no room for misunderstanding. Payment due to Vanquish Properties LLC. Market rate grace period, 5 days. Late fees apply. It felt strange to hit send. Not out of guilt, but from the clarity of it, the quiet finality. I wasn't waiting for them to do the right thing anymore. I was simply doing what they had trained me to do. 2 days later, Ezra forwarded me an email from Aspen. She'd applied for a receptionist job at a local salon. She'd used me as a reference. I approved the request without comment. Naomi came by that evening with takeout Thai, extra spring rolls, and we spread everything out across my dining table. Ezra showed up an hour later with cold sodas and a printout of the LLC's first quarterly report. You're technically profitable, he said, raising a brow. Didn't think your revenge arc would turn into a functioning business. I laughed. Really laughed and leaned back in my chair. They taught me to collect receipts, I said. I just took it a little further. Naomi grinned. Maybe too far, maybe not far enough, Ezra added. We clinked kid glasses and toasted to bad beginnings with better endings. Later, when the dishes were cleared and the house had gone quiet, I opened the drawer of my filing cabinet and slid the rent notice copy into a folder marked sent. It was the first document I'd created without fear attached to it. The house was quiet. My account was stable. My brush sat clean beside a canvas half covered in deep orange and ash blue. Tomorrow I'd finish it, but tonight I simply let the silence be mine. The studio smelled like new beginnings. Fresh paint, unfinished wood, a hint of turpentine that reminded me of college. I stood in the center of the space, sunlight pouring in through tall windows, and let myself take it in. All of it mine. I'd signed the lease under Vanquish Properties. The LLC had assets now, steady income from a mortgage they thought would break me. Instead, it built this. I unpacked the brushes first, lined them up by size, by memory. I hung the photo Mom gave me near the entrance, not for sentiment, but for witness, a record of who I used to be before I became this version of myself. When I dipped the first brush into color, my hand didn't tremble. I painted through the afternoon, broad strokes, no plan, just movement. The light shifted, the shadows stretched. My phone buzzed once from the counter and I wiped my hands to check it. A message in the family group chat unread since I left. Are you coming to dinner? We need to talk. Aspen's hours got cut. We're trying to catch up. Don't forget the mortgage is due. I stared at it for a moment, then typed. Rent is due on the 1st. Late fees apply. Then I blocked the thread. No more explanations, no more negotiations, just quiet. I turned off the phone, placed it in the drawer beneath the canvas table, and stepped back to look at what I'd created. It wasn't finished. It didn't need to be. The silence in the studio wasn't empty. It was earned. And as I picked up the brush again, I knew this wasn't revenge. It was return. The weeks blurred into a rhythm that belonged to me alone. Mornings started with coffee in the sunlit kitchen. Evenings ended with paint on my hands and quiet in my chest. Ezra stopped by sometimes with his lazy grin and sarcastic commentary. Naomi dragged me out for late-night noodles when she thought I was working too much. I wasn't lonely. For the first time, I was free, but freedom carried echoes. One afternoon, while balancing receipts for Vanquish properties, I noticed the numbers. The payments were consistent, arriving within the grace period, but never early. Always clipped, always begrudging. The silence between us had become transactional, but transactions still tied us together. A knock at the door broke my focus. It wasn't them this time. It was Mrs. Vega holding a folder. New listings, she said, stepping inside. Thought you might be interested. I raised a brow. You're recruiting me into real estate now, she smiled. You're already doing it. Might as well get paid more than rent checks. I flipped through the folder. Duplexes, small homes, condos, all bank-owned, undervalued, waiting. My fingers lingered on a modest 2-bedroom with a front porch. Start small, she advised. Diversify. Protect yourself. I nodded slowly. Vanquish Properties had begun as survival. Now it looked like a foundation. That night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The thought circled. They had taught me discipline, but I had weaponized it. They'd handed me invoices, and I had turned them into ledgers. They'd pushed me into scarcity, and I had found abundance. Maybe that was the truest form of return. The following Sunday, I drove past my old street, not to stop, just to see. The lawn looked overgrown. Aspen's car was parked crooked in the driveway, curtains drawn tight. For a moment, I wondered if they'd peek out, if they'd see me, but no one came. I kept driving. The studio waited with its half-finished canvas, the orange deepening into fire, the blue cooling into calm. My brush hovered, then moved with certainty. This time, I wasn't painting to escape. I was painting because I could. Months later, I stood in that same studio with Naomi and Ezra flanking me, both holding glasses of cheap champagne. On the easel rested a completed series, 6 canvases, each a reflection of the last year. Fragments of invoices, streaks of lavender salt lamplight, silhouettes of doors closing and opening. An exhibition, Naomi said firmly. People need to see this. People need to buy this, Ezra corrected. I laughed, shaking my head. It was never about selling. Everything's about selling, Ezra shot back, grinning. Maybe he was right. Maybe not. But as the evening sun flooded the room, I knew one thing. This was mine. Every brushstroke, every receipt, every line of defense I'd turned into art. The silence that filled the studio wasn't the absence of their voices. It was the presence of mine.